Welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife. And I know we have talked about family system theories and boundaries in the past, how they relate to a family system, why they're important, healthy boundaries, how do we do it? And you're probably thinking, based on the title of the podcast episode, how does that have to factor into the border? Well, it actually does. It applies to the situation we have on our border, and we're going to talk about how today. As always, I'm your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so first things first, for all of you who've missed previous episodes on family systems theory, family systems theory helps explain and identify family structure, how family systems and subsystems interact, how they develop and form and function, as well as the different varieties that are found. There's other factors too, but that's pretty much the most direct and simplified definition I can give you right off the bat. But I do have other podcasts that cover it, and I will try to remember to link them in the description below. That said, in regards to boundaries, boundaries, system theories, the definition that gives, and I pulled this straight from my textbook because I keep my textbooks, love them. The borders within a family between subsystems that help to define family membership and an individual's roles within the family system. So that's what boundaries are. And we've talked about healthy boundaries, knowing what your limits are, understanding how roles and relationships interact in a healthy way. So, boundaries in a family help you understand what your roles, responsibilities, and expectations are. They also define who is part of the family and who is not part of the family, and the different subsystems inside the family. For example, the couple subsystem. So you've got the family system, and then you've got the couple subsystem, and then the children's, and then the interactions between those, as well as the individuals. Each person has their own individual boundaries. And all of those internal boundaries interact. And then you have the external boundary of the actual family unit, what defines the family. So you know what your family unit is by who's inside the family. Your neighbor is not part of your family. They're your neighbor. You may treat them like family, you may love them like family, but they're probably not part of the family. Um, in that sense. Now, some people include their pets. Pets can be part of your family system if that's what you want. But you have that definition to know who's in the family and who's out of the family. The stranger who lives 3 streets over who you've seen once, not part of your family. And that's important to know because as members of a family, there are expectations and interactions and roles that occur. So, for example, parents have the expectation to care for their children, and children may have the expectations to help care for a family pet, those sorts of things. Parents are also expected to provide for their children, provide housing, clothing, food, those sorts of things. There are obligations and expectations based on the family system and the roles. Children probably have the expectation to go to school and to learn, um, be respectful, go to bed on time, pick up their dirty clothes, put away their toys, different things like that. There's roles and expectations given to each part of the subset of the family. Now, inside of these, we have different types of families, and we've talked about that in the past. I'm not going to go into depth here, but needless to say, these Systems, roles, understandings, and boundaries help the family function optimally. If there is no clear definition as to who is part of the family and who is not part of the family, then it is difficult to provide for the for like the parents to provide. If all of a sudden there can be like three extra kids in their house and they're just expected to clothe and feed and shelter them, that might be a shock to the system for the parents. Why am I all of a sudden in charge of three extra kids? Not that you may not want to help take care of every kid you feel is being underappreciated or neglected in your community. But if you do that, it's going to take away from your finite resources that are primarily supposed to be allocated to your family first. And that's family systems theory. Technically, a functioning family needs to take care of itself. So, being self sufficient is important. There are limited or finite resources allocated to each family. It's very unlikely that any family is going to have infinite resources. Everyone has at least the finite resource of time. Parents only have a certain amount of time and that they can allocate to their children. And so, when understanding the nature of finite resources, you have to make a judgment call as to what is the best way to allocate those resources. Let's break this down. Let's put it in a little bit more direct terms, kind of like I was doing before. And I'll give you a kind of an example from my life. There was a time when, before I met my wonderful husband, where I wondered if I was ever going to meet someone who I wanted to build a family with, who was going to be that partner, that teammate that I was looking for, and if I was going to be able to have kids of my own. And so I set myself up on a trajectory that if that did not happen, my game plan was to take care of children who didn't have someone to take care of them. And that was the trajectory I had originally planned. Eventually, I did meet my husband, and we did have a kid on the way. And I had to make a judgment call. I could keep working with these children who did not have as much parental involvement as may have been desired or optimal and were struggling. But that was taking a toll on my health, and I would have to put my child into daycare and have someone else take care of my child. Or I could allocate my time and resources to taking care of my own child first, which meant leaving the workforce and not being able to help these at risk kids anymore. That was a really hard call because I genuinely loved the children I was working with. I genuinely loved being able to encourage and support them. But I realized I was going to be able to do the most good for my kids. And if I was going to have kids, my first priority for me, in my opinion, needed to be my kids. I didn't have the blessing of being able to have a stay at home mother. I had a fabulous mother who did everything she could to be there for us as much as she possibly could. But because she was a working mother, did not have that opportunity. And so my husband and I decided to make the sacrifice, and it was a sacrifice. It was a massive hit in our income and lifestyle and ability to provide stuff monetarily for our kid, but I was able to be there physically. And so we made the judgment call that I was going to be a stay at home mom. And multiple times my husband has said, if you want to go back into the workforce, we can figure things out. I support you. But every single time I've always felt like first things first, it's my kids. And so that is where I have made my priority and my judgment call. So we've talked about these. I would love to take in every stray kid I came across who was being neglected, but I can't. We do not have the resources to do that. We volunteer, we do as much as we can in our community to help uplift other families, whether in our congregation or the kids' schools, other places. We are involved as much as we can in bettering the community in which we live in. But we have to take care of first things first, which is our family. So, how does that factor into our borders? Well, countries, just like families, healthy countries have to have a definition on what they are as a country, where they stop and start. And just like a boundary is, and so there is another definition in my textbook that says it's an invisible line and it's where a family stops and starts. Well, that is the same with the borders of a country. There's no actual, in some cases, in other cases, there are. Countries do have physical barriers, but in a lot of cases, a border is a line on a map. It's an imaginary line in the sand. More and more countries are moving to change that and make more solid, less permeable borders because of the need to put first things first. So, just like families have finite and limited resources, countries have finite and limited resources as well. And the government of the country, in some ways, is the leadership of the country. And its job is to provide a structure, government, its resources, roads, schools, bridges, whatever, for its citizens. And so there's the subset of government and there's a subset of citizen. And there are certain obligations with the role of government to provide certain things for the citizenry of its country. And different countries define that in different ways. It might be healthcare, it might be education, roads and bridges are pretty common. So it's those different structures that the country has defined as the obligations of the government to provide for its citizenry. The problem is, just like with a family system, if you have a bunch of people come outside of the family and insist on being included into the family system, those resources then have to be extended. Now, when you have people come in from outside, there are ways that we integrate people into our families that are organized and cohesive. For example, you have another kid. If you have a child, that child has entered the family unit in an organized, systematic method and is integrated as a member of the family. Maybe you adopt a child, then you are integrating a foreign member into as a member of the family, and therefore they're given all the rights and privileges of any other child in that family system. So in that regards, we have adoption as well. We also have foster. There's foster children who come in and are accepted as parts of the family system, even though they are not at the time permanent members of the family system. Or maybe a host exchange student. There's other ways to invite people into your family system temporarily or permanently that would not organically have been a part of the family system itself. And countries have the same thing with immigration or tourism or things like that. There are legal structure, organized methods and way to integrate yourself into a community and country system so that the system still functions in a way that is optimal for all members of the system. Now, when you have excessive amounts of individuals adding themselves to the system in an unstructured manner, that can put and does put stress on the finite resources of that country. I wish that everyone in the world who wanted the freedoms and blessings of the United States could have them. But that's not possible. The United States is not big enough. and does not have an economy robust enough to provide for the entire world. And that is unfortunate. But just like we can help volunteer in our communities, we can help strengthen our neighbors and surrounding community. We can do that as a country for our community and other nations. We can help with education, medical, humanitarian aid, and we do that as a country. We even help with defense for other countries. So we are doing what we can to be a good neighbor to the other nations that we interact with, but we are not capable of taking in every person who would like to live in our country as much as we might want to. Now, I have no issues with people who want to better themselves and come to this United States. I am the child of immigrants. I am also, I found out recently, I have Indigenous American ancestry. So I've got connections to both sides of the coin, and that's how it is. And a lot of people, most people in the United States, don't have native connections to this land. They are immigrants to this country, and that's what this country was founded on. Now, that said, there are concerns when we have issues with our border because not everybody who is coming illegally are individuals who just want a better life, who are good, kind, upright people who want to work hard and better themselves. A lot are. Now, according to the Department of Homeland Security, I got these facts and figures directly from them. Border encounters on the southwest borders are up 100% since the fiscal year of 2019. 100%. Fiscal year 2023, 169 individuals whose names were on the terror watch list were stopped at the southern border. But those are the only ones stopped. We have a significant number of known gotaways, people that they see on the cameras, people they know have gotten in. How many of them were on the terror watch list? We will never know. Maybe until it's too late. 35,433 individuals who were detained had criminal convictions. Over 27,293 pounds of fentanyl were confiscated. And that's enough to kill more than 6 billion people. When you have a border or boundary that is porous and ill-defined and non-functional, you may inadvertently let things into that system that you do not want in the system. Drugs, criminals, terrorists, that is a possibility. And that is a concern. Because we do have legal ways to enter this country. Now, the other concern, and this is the one that breaks my heart, this is the one that literally has caused me to cry, is the fact that what Dr. Phil brought up on The View the other day. He has been down at the southern border. He was talking to Border Patrol and the union for the Border Patrol down there. And he was asking them questions because there's evidently been instances of children coming across the border with phone numbers and addresses written on their arms and stuff, written on them. And the Border Patrol then goes and contacts those places. And he says, okay, so what happens with them? They're like, well, we call in, we find out, hey, do you know about this kid? Are you willing to take charge and custody of this kid? And they're like, okay, but what background check is done for those places? How do you know that those places are actually family? Are they safe? What are they? Is there a possibility that those places are sweatshops, basically unsavory characters who wish to do harm. And I'm going to phrase it that way, assuming that most people listening will understand what that means. But in case you have children listening, I am not going to use the other term. Watch the clip. I'll put it in my description. You'll know exactly what he's referring to. And they said, no, it is quite probable. We know for a fact that's happening. They know because there are so many instances of this happening. They know there are children ending up in these horrible, wretched situations. And I have heard from other sources that part of it is these cartels approach families and say, hey, it'll be easier for your kid to get up without you. We'll take them up to the border for you. And how many of them never see their kid again because they get thrown into one of these unsavory situations? And then they tell the kid, oh, you have to work it off. That's the cost of us getting you into the country. These are not safe situations. For reasons I cannot get into specifics, I do know individuals, firsthand accounts, and I have seen firsthand individuals whose lives were improved by making it right. They entered the country illegally. They realized what they did was not the best. They decided for themselves to change their status. They fixed their status and became legal residents of the United States and later citizens in many cases. And they were so much happier afterwards. I want people to be able to live the American dream. I want people to have the freedoms that this country was founded upon. I want that for them. I feel so blessed my ancestors came here and that I have that. I want them to be able to get that in a safe way. I don't want them being subjected to these criminals who smuggle people across the border in horrific conditions, who leave them to die in some cases, who kidnap their children in some cases, and do many other horrific things. I don't want them subjected to that. And so when we have a porous border, when we do not define entry in a clear, concise way, when we have a broken immigration system, that is what we are subjecting these people to. We are opening them up to criminals who will cause them harm. And on top of that, we are opening ourselves up to criminals who can enter our country and cause our country harm. So that's my 2 cents on the border and boundaries. Take it, leave it, form your own opinion, look up the facts for yourselves. But with everything going on, this is a national security issue. This is something that affects everyone in the country, but it also affects our military. And I felt like it may not be the current event everyone expected me to cover for my current event issue, but it's the one I felt I needed to address. That said, lots of stuff coming up. I have been receiving contacts from people who are interested in coming on the podcast. So we're working those out on doing some guest interviews and whatnot. And please keep sending them. Anyone, let me know and we'll see what we can arrange. I love finding resources, new resources for all of you guys. And as always, just stay safe. Be kind. Let's be the good we want to see in the world. Let's be that. Because we need to start with our lives and our families first. and then maybe that goodness can spread. All right. As always, I'm your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife.